Hi, my name is Akshay, and today I'm going to talk about generating 3D adversarial objects for robotic tasks. In this presentation, first I will give a small introduction about what it is we are trying to do, what kind of robots we are using. Then I'll talk about some background about the other data generators and data sets that are already out there for grasp learning, what exactly the grasp learning algorithms try to do, and what adversarial objects are. Moving on to the methodology, I will talk about how to create objects, how to introduce adversity into them, what kind of graspability index we are using, what kind of similarity index we are using. So the graspability index basically tells you if an object is hard to grasp or not, and if it is even graspable. And the similarity index compares objects with each other. We have also done some experiments, and I have some results in graphs to show you about these experiments. The experiments are about generating these adversarial objects, measuring their graspability in simulation, and also measuring their similarity. Finally, I will conclude with some future work that we are also planning to do. So the goal is to generate adversarial objects to improve the robustness of robotic grasping. Adversarial objects can be considered as corner cases or the most difficult to judge whether they are graspable or not, and if a robot is able to grasp such objects, then it's definitely more robust. This is going to be a synthetic data generator. It uses a voxel-based representation. A voxel is a 3D representation of a pixel. So a pixel is 2D and a voxel is 3D. All our voxels that we are using in these experiments are cube-shaped. The objects get harder to grasp with as we generate more children, as the generations go by. And we are also using the Poppy robot for our simulation experiments. So on the right, the rightmost image is of a Poppy robot in simulation performing example tasks. The one on its left is the image of an actual Poppy robot that we have in the lab, and the leftmost image is just the parallel plate gripper if you just want to do manipulation tasks. In the background, first I want to talk about some data generators and data sets that are already there to help in learning grasping. The Cornell dataset is the most famous, followed by the Jacquard dataset, and finally the EGAD. The Cornell dataset contains natural handmade images containing an RGBD image and multiple grasp rectangles. These grasp rectangles have 7 dimensions of representation, essentially incorporating the 3D position, the 3D orientation, and the width of the parallel plate gripper. Next is the Jacquard dataset, which is a fairly newer dataset. It is very similar to the Cornell dataset, but it is synthetic. It also contains, similar to the Cornell dataset, it also contains RGBD images and grasp rectangles. But these grasp rectangles only have 5 dimensions of representation. Essentially, what they do is take the 7 dimensions and project it onto a 2D image, and they eliminate the z coordinate from both the position and the orientation, and this has shown to be a good representation that is able to learn grasping. Finally, the EGAD, or the Evolved Grasping Analysis dataset, is the newest addition to the grasp learning datasets. It is a dataset of over 2,000 3D printable objects. They also have a set of 49 objects that can be reproduced in real world scenarios for learning. They have a complexity index where they compare the complexity of grasping these objects, but they do not have a similarity index, meaning that they don't compare the objects to each other and how similar they are to each other. Moving on to the types of grasp learning, they're broadly divided into 2 categories. The first is the vision-based learning. These uses CNNs and predicts optimal grasp position. So essentially, they try to match labels to ground truths. They do not consider any type of robot dynamics, so the robot motor values are not given as input, and it's purely to predict an optimal grasp position, whether the robot grasps it or not, or it has obstacles, is not considered. The second is the visuomotor grasp learning, which uses reinforcement learning. These combine both the vision and motor controls to form its input, traditionally using encoders and decoders to encode and decode the vision part. They are not supervised to fit any ground truths, but the major drawback is as it is known in reinforcement learning, it takes quite some time to actually learn. Moving on to 3D adversarial grasp objects. Traditionally, adversarial images are able to fool classifiers. So an adversarial image is an image similar to another image, but they are able to fool classifiers. In the same way, we want to define 3D adversarial objects. For an object to be considered adversarial, it needs to have certain properties. The first property is that it should be similar to another graspable object, and the second property is that it should be able to fool our grasper, meaning that the grasper should find it difficult to grasp this object. Thus, we formally define 3D adversarial grasp objects as objects similar to graspable objects but not graspable themselves. Moving on to creating new objects using voxels. The algorithm on the right shows how we use it, but it's a fairly simple object creation algorithm. Essentially, you have a fixed set of voxels that you want to use to create an object, and you place a voxel at a position. Since all the voxels are in the cube form, there are 6 faces of the cube where the next voxel can go, and so you choose one of the faces and place the next voxel there. Now, the combined 2 voxel has 10 faces where a new voxel can go in, and so you find all these available positions or open faces and place the third voxel there, and you repeat this and you find the new set of open positions or open faces again. Repeat this process until all voxels are consumed and you have a new image. If there are already existing images, it is a fairly simple process to convert them into voxelized format. There are libraries out there that exist that convert images or objects into voxelized form. So we have on the right, you can see we have an STL of a duck in full resolution, and all the subsequent images are voxelized versions with different resolutions, and you can choose which resolution you want depending on the processing power available. And as you can see, each of these images retains their grasp properties. So now the question is, how do you create adversity? Generating adversarial objects. So we have used genetic algorithms to generate adversarial or new children objects which are adversarial in nature. Genetic algorithms mainly has 2 parts to it, the crossover and the mutation. The crossover is basically when you have 2 parents, you take some part of parent A and some part of parent B and combine them to make a child, and then you do a small mutation where there's another small change in the child. Traditionally, mutations occur like how it is in the top image. So if position 7 is where the mutation occurs, then the position 7 voxel is just removed and all the other voxels just move to the left, and then you place the mutation at the mutation position. We have used a slight variation which helps in maintaining high similarity index. So instead of it just moving to the left, we have made it in the form of a queue. So When position 7 is removed, all the following voxels fall in like a queue and occupy position 7, 8, 9 again. And that way we are able to maintain a high similarity index, which we will also show in a few slides. The graspability index is based on the object's z coordinate after the grasp. So the graspability index tells us if the object has been grasped or not, or how hard it is to grasp such objects. For our experiments, we have only considered objects to be hard if there are no possible grasps on the object. But this condition can be relaxed as the objects gets more complex. The similarity index, we have used intersection over union of voxel position. This is known as the Jacquard index. There is also a relationship between the mutation algorithm and the similarity index, as I talked about a while ago. So using the same image that I showed before, if you consider the top traditional image, the IOU or the Jacquard index is 0.58, but if you use the variation, you always get a higher IOU. This is very specific to this similarity index and this mutation algorithm. If you use a different mutation algorithm, maybe this similarity index will not work, and you will have to come up with different similarity indexes. Moving on to the experimental results. So we have a baseline grasper which has no learning mechanism. The objects generated in this experiment are independent of any genetic modifications. We use this to check if our baseline grasper with no learning mechanism is even able to grasp normal objects. So the y-axis shows how high the object has been lifted, and essentially it is the difference in the center of mass from its rest position to its final position after the grasp. And the x-axis shows the generations of objects generated, again with no genetic modifications. And as you can see, even though there is no learning mechanism, the baseline grasper is able to grasp many objects. Now, moving on to the actual experiment of adversarial object generation. Here we've used a single parent to generate adversarial objects, and in the graph we've only shown distinct objects. On the y-axis we've shown the number of grasps possible for each object, and on the x-axis we have shown the generation of objects being generated. On the right you can see the color represents the intersection over union. So a darker color shows a lower Jacquard index, but a higher, but a lighter color shows better similarity index or Jacquard index. It means that the objects are more similar to the parent. We have also used two parents as seed to generate objects, but the similarity index takes a hit here. It's essentially because when you take two random objects that are completely different, and you take some part of object A and some part of object B and you combine them, it won't be similar to either parent. But we've done the experiments, and here we compare them to both parents, and we report the one that's the best similarity index. We report the similarity index of the parent it's most similar to. Again, it only shows distinct objects, and as you can see, there are objects with no possible grasps, and these will be considered to be our adversarial objects. In conclusion, we have presented a data generator capable of creating a diverse set of adversarial objects. There are no repetitions, and even then we are able, with just 12 voxels, we are able to create at least 15 to 20 adversarial objects with just a single parent as seed. In future work, we would like to test different similarity criterions and mutation variations as I said, there is a relationship between the similarity criterion and the mutation or the whole genetic algorithm, and so we can try different genetic or evolutionary algorithms with different similarity criterion and do more experiments. The other thing we want to do in the future is incorporate learning into the grasper. We also want to use learning to drive the genetic algorithm or evolutionary algorithm. So basically, when the object has hundreds of voxels, the children generated might be in the millions. So using some sort of learning to actually pick out or only generate adversarial objects is a field of study that we are interested in, is a field of research that we want to do. We also want to perform mutations in continuous space. So right now, there are 6 faces to the voxel, and the next voxel can only go on one of the available faces. That's not really true in the real world, since there can be a small variation. It can be, half a centimeter or half a millimeter to the left or the right, and so performing mutations in continuous space will help us simulate that much better. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. Any questions can be directed at these emails. Once again, thank you very much for listening in.